Hi everyone, and welcome back to Adventures in Nodeland. I am back streaming today, and we are back here with a friend, and so we should be able to get something good to get something nice done today. I'm very happy on everything. So everything, we are pushing out content. Everything is connected. It took me so long to set it up all again, which I almost regret to. Have done at this time of the year. I have been. This is an impromptu stream, more or less. I planned this for a while with Jonas, but there's been so many hiccups. I that that's been wrecked my life in the last few weeks. So basically, I came back from my trip in Paris, and then I got sick, and then I stayed sick, and then I had to rush up all the things that I need to do before Christmas in a week, including really wanted to do this stream because I have really something that really wanted to show you that I weren't able to. So here we go. We have a few people. Oh, some of my usuals. Thank you, guys. I really wanted to um, say hi to you. So very happy to see, and I want um, uh, to. I'm here today with a friend, okay, and I'm going to do my usual Twitch for my usual tweets first. I'm live on stream, okay, on and I'm going to introduce you my friend, which already been on the channel before, but I have not really. You probably don't remember him because this was, I think, last year at the very beginning, okay, of my Twitch career, essentially. And so let me introduce you to Jonas Galvez. Here it is. Hi, Jonas. How are you doing today?
Hey folks, I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, it's been quite a while. I think over a year, right? That we were together at Nearform. So much changed since then.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, that. So you changed it. You moved from one job to another. Essentially, me and Jonas worked together in year from. Essentially, was his manager more or less, and then I ended up, and then he worked for some other friends, Node Source, and then you changed company, right? You where are you at? And you are from Brazil, so a lot of people from Brazil will resonate.
Yeah. Well, the basic flow there is that I was with Nearform with you, and then I went to Node Source, which is I was still working heavily with Node.js and Node.js performance, doing architectural reviews, spending a lot of time with clients, and that was my job, just staying in calls with clients. But now I'm back to the trenches, doing some real coding for a change. So I took a challenge, was offered a position of feature FM, which is it's a platform for independent artists to promote their work. So it's got a variety of tools to that end. But it's a great challenge because we have multiple products to work on, and we're trying to get to the maximum of performance, and that aligns with my current research. Because essentially, in the past year, the web has been going through a revolution. The web development world, with multiple new frameworks coming out, everyone's doing Astro, and there's Remix and Next.js, and React has been going into this madness with React server components and all the whole shebang, and it's gotten people confused. So I have been following all of these efforts closely, trying to figure out what's the next big thing, and where I should invest my time. As you know, I have been a long promoter of Vue.js. I used to be a core contributor to Nuxt.js, the Vue SSR framework. That was around the time when I realized, hey, you know what? Fastify is the way to go. I need to be investing my time in Fastify, and I started to trying to bring the same level of developer experience, but not starting with developer experience so much, but really the functionality, the pattern, the Next.js and Nuxt.js, and all these frameworks implement. And I tried to come up with like the minimum base library that could make that happen without turning it into a massive black box and a massive behemoth of a framework. Because one of the things that attract me about Fastify is how much transparent and clean the setup is. You stay in control. So if you allow me, I will move to the Festify Vite documentation page here. So I'll start talking about it. So when I was working with Nuxt.js and I was contributing to it, one of the things that bothered me is that the framework Nuxt.js uh, stayed in control, and a lot of the functionality in terms of rendering and handling requests, that sort of thing, was heavily abstracted into the framework, but it was second tier. You know, with Nuxt.js and Next.js, you have a framework that lets you build client-side applications, and for a long time, to me, it felt like the server part was an afterthought. Was something that, hey, let's try and make this friendly for developers, and so they can get things done. But you lose a lot of freedom, and you lose a lot of control of how your server is running. Um, and a lot of the functionality stays in a black box. You no longer have a clear understanding of how things are loading, how things are coming to life. You just rely on the framework. A lot of folks who use Next.js and Nuxt.js really have no idea what's going on under the hood, and that's the thing that I set out to change. And around the same time, Vite was coming to life, and it's an amazing project that has become a sort of standard in the industry for building applications. And I saw a perfect match. So instead of trying to, even though that the thought came to my mind that a new framework was needed, eventually I realized that, you know what, Fastify is the framework. The plugin system of Fastify is enough. The Fastify CLI is enough. And all we need really is a clean, elegant way to run Vite together with Fastify and also serve Vite built applications from Fastify. So that's how Fastify Vite came to life, which is a Fastify plugin for Vite integration. It has had many iterations so far, um, some mistakes along the way. I think the biggest mistake was not to invest heavily in proper examples and documentation. So after 2 years, this is changing now. So I have started taking a very disciplined approach to, making sure the documentation really is up to date and really covers everything, and have started working on examples, doing a lot of dog fooding in a few projects for clients. And now I see that on NPM, it's holding steady at above 700, 800 downloads a week. So there are a few brave souls out there which are running it. And in my previous job at NodeSource, the APM solution they have for Node.js, which is called NSolid, there's a web interface for NSolid called NSolid Console, and NSolid Console is built today with Fastify Bit. So that's
Whoa,
that has yeah
amazing. I didn't
it's
know that.
yeah, it's running with Festify Bit. It took a while to get there, but it's running with Festify Bit. So I also know a few other companies who are just using Festify Bit with no additional functionality. A lot of things cooked up on top of the base setup. But the key thing to understand, and perhaps I maxed out my marketing full writing this, coming up with this landing page, but I think it captures the essence of what I'm trying to build here. Um, and I have to say, at this point, Festify Vid feels no longer specific to Festify. I think the whole idea here is to have a standardized way to take a client-side application, something that you would typically let the browser render for you, like a single-page application, JavaScript, and you have a framework here that lets you expose your client side application to a server side setting, in a way that for all your client side routes, you're able to register cleanly also server side routes, so you can enhance functionality, have things like get server side props, that sort of thing. And it's more of a generic approach on how to integrate the two, how to connect the client how to a server side setting, and how to enable server side rendering when you do that. So as I go through the docs, I would like to do a quick tour of the new documentation suite, if that's okay. You see what I mean. But let me go through these boxes here in the landing page because, like I said, I think they capture the essence of it fairly well. So the key thing here is that it is a Fastify plugin. You have your Fastify server, and it will stay in control of everything. The Vite development server gets attached to your Fastify server, and it's enabled only in development. In production, no Vite development server boots up. It's just your Fastify server delivering your bundle and performing SSR whenever necessary. So that's the key. The principle number one is to not build something new. It's just Fastify, and it's a plugin for Fastify. The second thing is that, like I said, it allows you to switch between the Vite's development server and just delivering a production bundle with ease. It has universal route modules, which is really the key feature of all the frameworks. This is something all frameworks have in common. Astro, Next.js, Nuxt.js, Remix, Solid Start, Quick, they all have the notion that you have a route module that's a component, a Vue component, a React component that renders a page. And this route module, which is just a JavaScript module, uh, in a client rendering setting, it's just that. It's just a component that runs on the browser. But when you try to enhance that into a full-blown server-side rendering unit, you need some customization, such as how do you render the head section of the page? How do you do data fetching? And you see that all these frameworks have their own way of handling that, but it all boils down to having a route module, a JavaScript module that exports a default component, and it also exports a few things in addition. In the case, for instance, of Next.js, you can export a key to set the head, and in Fastify View, you can export a function that sets the head, and you see the similarities. All the frameworks are doing the same thing. They're just changing the names of the functions. So Festify Vite allows you to, build your own route modules. It creates a framework that lets you load your client-side routes and expose them to the server, and you can go crazy with the things you can do. Which leads us to the next box here, which is essentially, like I said, it goes beyond Festify at this point. It could be extracted into a generic library for any framework, has a generic framework toolbox because of the way I break down the steps of loading a client-side application with hooks. We'll get to that in a bit. And with these hooks, you can essentially control everything and build your own framework. So far, so good. Are you with me, Matteo?
I am. I am with you. Like I was sold on this long time ago. So yes.
Okay, so let me give you a quick tour of the documentation. So we have the key documentation, and I place a warning at the top. So if you're coming from Next.js or Nuxt.js, and you're looking for a practical Fastify flavored replacement, you can jump straight to Fastify React or Fastify View, which are render packages for Fastify Vite, the official render packages for these frameworks. More are likely to come. I have already tried doing that, but I realized that I only have so much bandwidth in terms of maintaining these things, and React and Vue are the frameworks I'm typically most involved with. So I'm hoping that in time, more people that see the value in this setup will come up with more official renderers for us. But right now we have these two. So the key thing in the documentation here is that you have the guide that goes through Festify Vite, uh, And you have also the documentation for these specific renderers for Vue and React, which actually just use Festify features to implement a lot more features. So in this section of the documentation, I give a quick intro, a quick walkthrough of the basic setup, but the real juice here that most people will want to read is the rendering function and router integration section. So I'm going to go through this one by one. But first, going back here to the getting started section, when I was talking about hooks, this is what I meant. So you have these architectural primitives. If you want to have access to your client module on the server for SSR or other purposes, Fastify Vite offers granular hooks that let you set up a rendering function, an HTML templating function, and also register server-side routes for client routes. So essentially, you have like you have your Fastify code base, and you have a client folder inside your Fastify code base. That client folder contains all the code that's supposed to be delivered to the client, but you also need access to that code in order to perform server-side rendering. So the first hook that Fastify executes is prepare client, which receives as parameter the contents of the server entry point, the, the server module that you expose all your client-side code. And with that, it executes serially these other functions like create HTML function, create render function, based on the access to that module. So you can create an HTML function using Vite's standard for delivering HTML pages, and you can create a render function for whatever components you want to server-side render. And then you also can create individual Fastify routes mapping to the client-side routes that you have. So I'm going to go here to the first step here, which is rendering function. I'm just going to go over real quickly to explain the basic functionality. So let's take a look at the React vanilla example here. Um, this is what registering Fastified Vite looks like. For convenience, it can take has root parameter import meta URL, and it will do the necessary changes here to figure out the dir name. And with this hook right here, you receive a reference, like I said, to your client-side code, but you're accessing it on the server. And with this reference, you're able to create essentially a server-side rendering function. So in here, I place, this is what the setup looks like. You have your Fastify server, you have your client, you have your base component, in this case, a base React component, the index HTML that Vite expects, and you have a mount script that will connect, that will load base and prepare it for client-side rendering, and an index.js that is not loaded by the client. This is where I also load the component, but with the purpose of exposing it to the server. So I actually have a graph here that explains this, how this works. So let me show you the code first. You have client based JSX. This is the component we want to render. And this is the index HTML page. This is what Vite expects to be able to render an HTML page. We have a fragment here that's used for templating, for placing the server-side rendering bit. And you also have mount.js, which takes care of rendering the code client side. So if you go here and take a look at mount.js, you see that we're importing create app from base.jsx, and we do the client side rendering bit. And in index.js, we're also importing create app, but this is going to be loaded it's going to be used by Fastify Vite to create the server-side rendering function. So going back here to the diagram, you can see how this works. You have your client base, which is the component. For client-side rendering, that is a regular SPA with no server-side. You just have the mount script and the index HTML page, and then you have client-side rendering. But you also importing that component in client index.js. So that gets loaded and provided to the prepare client hook, and then you get sent to the create render function hook, and the result of this hook becomes the repli render function. So once you have repli render available, which returns element, this element get is what gets inlined into the index HTML page. And what I just described here is essentially the mechanics of all frameworks with a few changes here and there. They all have the setup where you're able to code your application as if it were an SPA application, no server side, and they have a mechanism that lets you load that application on the server side and also make it available for server side rendering. So with Fastify Vite, you get to do that, but you do it staying completely in control of the whole thing by using these hooks. So the create render function hook will generate repli render, and then there is a create HTML function that will create repli HTML. These are all covered in the other sections of the documentation, but this is the gist of it. When it comes to setting up using Festify View to set up a client application for server-side rendering. Now it starts getting really interesting when we're talking about router integration. That is, on the client side, typically you have something like Vue router or React router. Of course, that's becoming outdated now that everyone's doing HTMX and going for multi-page applications rather than SPA applications. But still, that's still the way Next.js renders pages, and that's still the way Next.js renders pages. That's still the basics, the basic mechanics. And for router integration, I'm going to go here to the view hydration example. So what's different about this example is that instead of just rendering a view component, you have uh, a real full-blown view page with individual client-side routes. And the way these routes are set up, I'm going to open these two files, base.js and routes.js. So you can see here in base.js that I import the routes from routes.js. I create the app, and Vue has this really handy function, create SSR app, that essentially will do the appropriate changes for server-side rendering, but it can still run on the client and give you a client-side application running. So you can have a single create app function for your application. That's the case also for React and the other components. I just really like the way Vue does it. So in here you have your base component, and it's loading the routes. The routes are defined as follows. So you see here that for every route, you have a path and you have a component. And then in client index.js, you import the create app function, and you also import routes. So this is the bit that Festify Vite also does for you magically, so to speak, but it's very well documented in that page. So as long as your client module has a route property, essentially what Festify Vite will do, and I'm just going to jump straight here into the diagram I have. Uh, if you have a routes export in your client index, um, Festify Vite will automatically loop through it and run the create route hook. So we would register one individual Festify route with the appropriate HTML templating function for Vite for doing the server-side rendering of that component, but individually for each of the routes available. So you have a router on the Festify side that matches the router on the client side. And granted, for server-side rendering, that really does mean that you're going to have like a double step in routing, where for the requests arrive at Festify, go through Festify's router, And then when it gets to the server-side rendering page, which is essentially executing view and view router on the server, the process will be repeated, but it will keep the setup in sync. You have routes on the server matching the routes on the client. And when you load the application on the client, and you know what, I'm just going to go and run this so you can see. So I'm going to go here to maintain, Fastify, vite, wait, yeah. CD examples, CD view, hydration, and let me see if I get I have all the depths here. Let me open my door because it's starting to get really hot in here, and my AC unit is not working. So I'm letting the cool air from the next room flow in.
npm is always very slow, man. So there was a nice interesting question in the chat. um, um, One is about vitest, okay, and jest, vitest, vitest, and jest, and friends don't let friends use jest at this point, okay, at least for Node. Like if you're building a React app that runs on the browser, you probably should not. You probably can use Jest. It's a great tool. Okay, it was burned for that specific purpose of more or less testing React components. That's great. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If, however, you are using it with Node, you are basically your test that you are writing. You are testing against the Jest runtime, which is different than the Node runtime. Now there is a tiny module from one of the maintainers of Babel to make Jest less Jest. So where you actually not you removing all this, different globals. So every time you run a just test, it creates different globals. Because it creates different globals, you are more or less screwed, essentially. Because at that point, you don't know if the globals that you have are equals or not to the one of Node. So it's pretty bad. Okay. So yeah, essentially.
What was the question? Sorry.
So this was the first question. And where you search more about this, I posted an issue, okay, of Jest, and there is probably more. But you can just look at, I don't know, most of my repos, they have plenty of issues of people complaining about Jest and different globals and so on and so forth. Every single
Yeah,
time, just a nightmare, to be honest. Vites do not have this problem, use different things to implement isolation, so it's great. I wouldn't still use it. It's great, again, for React-based things. I would probably not use that for doing my testing, but for Node app. But it's a good tool. Then there is another question from Alevo: are the synchronization between the client and service, the client and server router path made manually?
Sorry, I'm not sure I follow.
Okay.
Take a look here.
So are the synchronization between the client and the server router paths made manually?
Nope, that's automatic. I'm about to show you. All right, so this is the really basic example of how to have a client-side application with a router, with a client-side router that lets you just use history API to change the URL without going to the server, and integrated with Festify and still be able to server-side render and have direct access to those routes. So this should be a good example. Let me go here to the code. All right. So this is the view example that demonstrates how to do router integration. So here you have Festify Vite, your Festify server. Uh, I import I import Festify Vite, and the render package that I pass into Festify Vite. So the setup here is essentially start a Festify server with a one-line logger for convenience. You register Festify Vite. You pass in the renderer options, which are all the hooks that you can set up. And then you have to call this at this point. I would love to get rid of this, but I couldn't figure it out how yet. But essentially, if you are running in development mode, this will make sure the video development server is ready. If you are not running in development mode, it will just do nothing, but you still need to have this to use specify bit. So what's in renderer? So in renderer, you have the import to views render to string, which is the server-side rendering function. I have a utility here that's used to safely serialize JavaScript into script tags. And then from this module, I export create render function and create route, which are the hooks that Fastify Vite supports. So this is actually defined out of the box, and for most vanilla use cases, you won't have to provide your own create route hook, but it allows you. This is what allows you to go crazy with the features that you want to develop. For instance, this is how you would implement get server side props, because in Next.js for every route, uh, they in server side render they will execute get server side props, and you get access to the data returned from it. But if you are doing client-side navigation, then what you need to do to execute get server-side props is fire an API request. And Next.js will automatically turn your get server-side props function into an API endpoint that also works during client-side navigation. So you have it run automatically before rendering the page, first render SSR, and as soon as you start navigating client side, if you go back to the page and you need to execute get server side props again, what you see if you open developer tools is that Next.js will make a request to an API endpoint, and that's automatically registered. So we're going to get to that, but you can imagine here that this hook is getting executed for all the routes that you have on the client, in this case, view router. And if you wanted to register an additional route for, say, a get server side props like functionality, this is where you would do it, because in here you are defining the route for rendering the component, but you could also be doing something like this, which is, payload and then the original route path, because you would have the route that renders the component and an additional route register that can be used by that component to obtain access to data. So in here you have the create route hook that's essentially just receiving the module, the route, and you are able to register the route. And then you have the create render function that actually receives the route module, and you create reply render. So you see here that it's receiving create app, and in the body of this function, I create the app, render to string, and then I return the variables that the index HTML template function expects. So you see here that I'm returning element and hydration, and if you go to client, you see that I have hydration and element. And let's take a look at the routes now. So you have views index for the route for the root page, and you have order. And this relates to the question, like for this example, these routes right here are set manually. The Fastify View and Fastify React packages actually take this step out of the way and just behave like Next.js and Nuxt.js, where you have a pages folder and it will automatically infer the setup of your routes from the pages folder. But that's like an extra step. In these examples that I'm showing now, these show Fastify View from the ground up. Okay, here's what you can do with Fastify View. You can essentially build your own framework, but we're going to get to the practical part later on. So you see here, you have these routes. I placed this here to show an example of such customization. So in here, for instance, I'm telling the server side to trigger the full bar hook, but I'm doing it from the routes array that's on the client side. And the way that works is that, I mean, you see here that I'm receiving the route, and the route will be this object right here. And then I check if trigger full bar hook is defined there. And if it is, I add the on request hook here to full bar hook. So this is just an example of how you can customize the registration of the server-side routes from your client-side routes that are used for client-side rendering. So let's dive into this application. You see here that I have a little to-do list of sorts. And in the client, I have index, where I basically render it using Vue. And then I also have some client-side code to push items to it, but they're not really updating live. This is really like an education example. But what you see here is that if I go to another page, let me open developer. And you see that did this request is straight from view router. This navigation that we just saw now was history API, like history push, and then a new view component gets rendered in place. But if you refresh, and if you go here to core, you see that it's rendering server side. So this is all intro to what's coming next. Are you following so far, Matteo? Any questions?
I am.
Okay.
Hey.
So let
Um. So I'm following. There are a few questions while we are asking. What happens when there are 100 of routes? Are there scalability issues?
I don't think so. It would be the same with every framework. With Festify, you have a very high performance router. Um, you could do something like set up a wildcard in Fastify and just leave view router uh, do all the routing. But in my tests, uh, I don't know why, but this was actually detrimental, and it didn't appear to change much the performance very much. If only by a few milliseconds to the other side, which is surprising. So in the end, I decided I think there are some I don't know, some optimizations in Vue router and potentially also in React router that when you provide the exact route, um, it potentially skips a few steps during server-side rendering. So that's why I think there's not much of an overhead here. But it was surprising to see that when I tried to just letting everything hit view router directly and bypass Festify's routing altogether, I actually got a few milliseconds slower. So I'm thinking that's what's happening here. Yeah, as long as we have a Festify route for each of our client-side routes, we save on things that are happening on the client-side router. This is something that I would love to investigate at some point. Any other questions?
No, well, yes. There is a question from Jahood. Hi, Jahood. Yes, there is TTL on my streams. If there are anything, so there are quite a few of the past ones are published on YouTube, my YouTube channel. Some of the ones that I did in October never will. Are the recording and sitting on my hard disk, and I need to go and edit them and polish them. To be honest, I didn't know if people were actually interested in the recording, so because they had not much big view numbers. So if you are, I will push myself to get the to start doing it again. Essentially, cool. Keep going,
All right. All
Jonas.
right. So I'm going to jump straight to Fastify View, which is the core renderer for View in Fastify Bit. So Fastify View is essentially this file, but with a lot more and a lot more features. And I'm going to try and do a quick tour of it. So I'm going to go to the docs here. So let me jump straight to project structure. So if you're using Fastify View, this is what the layout of the application will look like. And this is how it differs from running a full-blown framework like Next.js or Nuxt.js. You don't have a CLI, and you do have to have some files in place that are hidden and abstracted away in these frameworks. Not to say that with Festify View I wasn't able to hide and abstract a lot of the boilerplate, but I tried to do that in a transparent manner, and we'll get to that in a bit. But essentially, a minimal Festify View project may look like the following. You have your Festify server, you have the client folder, which contains all your client side code cleanly separated. I think that's an excellent pattern to have even if you are building a monolith, which essentially this is, you have a Festify server capable of returning API requests, and you also have your server-side rendering routes in the same server that's a monolith. Even in that setup, I think it's important to keep your client code separate. So this is the layout I have been using and recommending to people. Have your server.js and you have a client folder. In the client folder, you have an index.js file. That's the server entry point. That's essentially um, how Fastify Vite gets access to the client code. And then you have your index.html file and you have a pages folder. So you see here that a few files are missing. You don't have a mount file. You don't have a routes file. Those things are being taken care of by Fastify View. Um, but the way it's doing that, and just to finish the layout here, you have your server, your client, and you have your vite configuration file, and you have your package.json file. This is the absolute minimum setup. But like I said, there are a few files here that are being used, and you do not need to have them in your folder because they are provided automatically by Fastify View if you don't have them. But let me go here to this piece of the configuration documentation. So for Fastify View, for instance, you have what is called virtual modules. So for instance, Fastify View application has a root component that does layout integration. Uh, you don't need to have this root.view file present in your project in order for it to work because it's provided by Fastify View. But all of the files that are provided by Fastify View are documented and available in the package. And if you want to have, for instance, a root.view file that's different from the one that's provided out of the box, all you have to do is copy this file from your node modules. It should be available under node module slash Fastify at Festify slash view slash virtual. And then all these files, you can copy these files and place in your client folder. And then Festify View will start using those files instead. Essentially, it will be shadowing the files that are provided out of the box. And you don't have to keep in your project for it to work. So I think that was the cleanest and most transparent way to have framework like features and save you from having a lot of boilerplate files that you rarely have to change. But if you do, you can, and it's all documented, and it's essentially one larger view app, um, which with whose core parts you don't need to have in your project. But if you need to customize something or change something, you can, such as is the case for routes.js, which contains the part that loads files from the pages folder and turns those into actual routes. You have the core.js file, which provides some functionality around data fetching, and you have the default create.js file, which is essentially the boilerplate for instantiating your application. And this is the bit that's hidden away in frameworks, and you cannot change that. You cannot change that in Nuxt.js or Next.js or Quick or Remix. It's black box. It's a black box. But if you take this transparent, open approach with Fastify Vite, and these render packages, you actually have the opportunity to customize the setup and extend it whenever you need. So going back here to the project structure of a Fastify View application, these are the this is the rundown of the essential files. Like I was saying, the Fastify server, the Vite configuration file, the Vite application module loaded by Fastify Vite. It must export an object with create, routes, and context. We'll get to context a little later on. And then you have the Vite application HTML template with all the placeholders. And then you can have as many route modules as you want under pages. And of course, this is configurable. Um, so exploring here the files of a basic Fastify View application, you have Fastify Vite. And in here, instead of passing an object, you're passing the name of the package. So you register Fastify Vite with the root and the renderer, and you're good to go. Uh, you also need to have present, and this is not something that it's provided, it needs to exist. You need to have a Vite configuration file. And this Vite configuration file needs to import the official plugin for Vue and the Festify View plugin. So there is a counterpart, there is a Vite counterpart to this setup, and it's made possible as a Vite plugin part of the same package. So you have server Vite config, you have client index.js, where you provide context routes and create. You have client index HTML, and you have client pages index view. This is just an example. If I go here to um, let me open the main example that I have. So I have something here called Vue Kitchen Sink, and there's also a React Kitchen Sink, which Mathieu will remember because it was part of the other project that I was working on. Let me see if we run out of the box here. Oh, let me stop this one. Start again. All right. So this is the kitchen sink for Fastify View. It contains examples using all the features. This one I added just last week as I was rewriting the movie quotes app. So I realized I had no example on how to send a post request with form data to a route, but now there is an example to do so. So if you want to explore everything that you can do with Fastify View, I would recommend starting with, sorry, the starters folder, and you have React Base, Vue Base, which contains nothing, React Base contains nothing, just like a blank project for you to start out with. But if you go to View Kitchen Sink, you should have all these examples. So for instance, for the form example, you have an example here of how to execute, um, how to make your view component handle a post request and redirect and return data to the client, which is what we're going to do with the mobile quotes example. All right, so I think I've spent enough time with the intro, and we should get down to business. So, full disclosure, I already went through this rewrite, and so this is not going to be like live on the spot because a lot of what I'm about to do is coming from memory, but hopefully it should be interesting nonetheless. So I'm going to go to my playground folder here and clone the Platformatic movie quotes app. All right, so if I recall correctly, what? I have effects here. So first it's, okay, so just npm run setup. Let me start, okay, seems like install the front end. All right, running migrations. What was the other? Dev, okay.
So, are there any plan to support Svelte?
Yeah, I mean, there is a package that's a bit outdated now because Belt went through so many changes in the past year. But yeah, we have the code for the solid renderer and the svelte renderer. Um, it just really I just really wanted to have to make sure that I have the Vue and React ones very well covered and very well documented, and really have a focus on creating examples for those. But once I get to that stage, and people are coming to the project now, and hopefully we'll get some contributions. Like for instance, I was amazed to see a couple days ago I got this PR, and it really goes above and beyond in providing TypeScript support for Festify Vite. So this should help pave the way for a bunch of things in improving the setup. I have been doing a fair amount of TypeScript myself. Um, I still hate it, but it's inevitable. So okay, so this is the Platformatic movie app.
Yay!
It contains the Platformatic DB server and an Astro server that's running concurrently, and one uses the other. And I love this example. It's really well made and a really great way to demonstrate all the features. And I set out to rewrite these in Vue.js, and I'm not sure how much time we still have, but I would like to take this step by step
I can
you
stay,
know,
I don't know,
make.
another 20 minutes if you want. Can do
Okay,
another
okay. I
20,
think,
25 minutes.
yeah. I mean, I have a lot of the code ready to show to demo. So
Maybe
if
we
you
just
end
do
up
a little
running
bit of
out
a
of time,
walkthrough. I need to get through it.
okay. So let me go to the finished version that I have, so I don't keep you here for another hour. So essentially, I started creating the view version here, and let me stop this one. And what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna go to apps, and I'm gonna start the API one. Okay. All right. So we have the database running, and in here, and just so you know, my original attempt was to make it, like I said, into a monolith. So that's why I no longer have an apps folder here. I just have like server, and I have a client folder, because my original intention was to run with Platformatic DB. But like I said before the stream, I ran into an issue with WebSockets, and for some reason, and I'm going to show you what's happening. But for some reason, with Platformatic DB, I can run Fastify View development server. But anyways, I have already removed that, so I turned it into Fastify server, just really replacing. Let me go here to the other folder. All right, so for the original example, I have movie codes front end. So this is the thing that I'm replacing with Fastify Vite. So the original code, you have your Astro application, and you have your Astro components. And in the view with Fastify Vite, you have client and you have components, layouts, lib, and pages. So this is the finished rewrite. So just to give you a quick walkthrough, you have the server imports Fastify form body, so we have access to form data. Imports Fastify Vite, register Fastify Vite, Fastify View, the whole shebang that I was just showing. And it will start on port 3000, the same one as the Astro example. And in here, there's one bit of change that I was actually required to override one of the Fastify View modules with one of my own. So you see here, I have client mount.js. This mount.js file wouldn't need to exist if I was following the convention. And the convention was to just use the main. Um, actually, um, it can stop existing now because I changed how it works. So I'm just going to delete that. But the reason I added that is that I had a different element here to mount the application on. And for that, I needed my own version of the file to tweak it. But in the end, I went back to the original one, so it's no longer needed. It's just going to mount on main. So this is the index.html file that's required by Vite, and this is the key change, one of the key changes between one and the other, because with Astro, all of this code is in layout. So layout contains everything up to the doc type. And with Fastify Vite, we're actually relying on templating this index.html file, that this is the front and central entry point as far as Vite is concerned. So Vite will parse this file. You'll see a type module here, and we'll look for mount.js, which is a virtual module, and it's going to start building things. But every Vite project needs to have an index.html file. And so this having the whole page has a component, as it's done in Astro with a layout, this wouldn't really work with Vite. um, bearing some changes because in the end, Astro is also using vite under the hood. But if you're trying to keep a vanilla setup, you need to have an index HTML setup, and I think that's cleaner, and that's why I stuck with this convention for Festify View. So in here you have what used to be layout in the original example, and then you have the root route, and this is, let's take a look at how it looked before in Astro. So I'm gonna go here, front end, pages, index.astro. So in here, and I love the convenience of just being able to put all the code that runs on the server and runs on the client in the same section and treat it as one. This this is amazing about Astro. I love the simplicity of it. Um, and you can see that it's somewhat inspired by Vue.js because you have like these different sections for the script and the layout. So the one thing I don't really like is going full vanilla JavaScript for everything because it's not scalable. Depending on the size of your application, your code is going to grow a lot, and this is one of the main reasons why I'm still sticking with Vue, and I still recommend Vue as the most mature and reliable framework out there and product framework. But you see what I mean right in a bit. So you have Index Astro. In Index Astro, you're doing all the event assignments, the listener assignments here. You have these components in the Vue version. It's pretty much the same, with the exception that for running code on the server, you have the get data export. And this is something documented here. In If you go to Fastify View, route modules, you see everything that you can export from a route module and how it changes behavior. In this case, we're exporting a function called get data. And this is akin to get server-side props in Next.js, but it's implemented using Fastify Vite hooks only. So in here, in order to execute some code on the server, we have get data, and looks pretty much the same with the exception that I need to return stuff from it in order to access on the component. For the title, instead of having in the other example we have, let me just close this one. In the other example for layout Astro, you see that the title is embedded into the template for the HTML. And with the Vue version, um, you have to export get meta. And get meta will fill your head with title and link tags and whatever else you need. So you see here for the return value of get data, which is quotes and page, all of those will be accessed through the use route context function that's also coming from a virtual module in Fastify View. So this is pretty much how the setup differs. In Astro, granted, it's much simpler as you do not need this additional boilerplate, but it's still simple nonetheless with Vue.js as well. So you have this in a regular script block for the get data export and the get meta export, and then you use the special script setup block for Vue to feed the component with context. And then the template just uses Vue instead of the Astro syntax. So let me show you the code action edit component, how it looks now. So for code action edit, you see the Astro version, you have the props, and you destructure from props. I love the convention here. It's really handy. Um, in Vue, you just use the define props helper, and everything that's available in props should be available in the template as well. So in here, code action edit, you go to the edit route, and in the edit route, you see more of the same. Importing the quote form data interface, importing the quote form component, exporting get meta for setting the title of the page. Here's some leftover debugging. You have also the get data export for running code on the server. So you see here, we're receiving references directly to the request and reply object from Fastify. And handle post, handle get. In both instances, we return an object so you can access that object through use route context. So let me show you that running. I'm going to go here to movie app, pnpm run dev. All right. So this is the same index page that you see in the Astra app. And go to the edit route, change something in the database, works the same. So let me take a moment here. You pretty much, all of the other pages are going to be more of the same. You have this basic pattern of exporting a get data function from your route modules. And in the script setup section, you use route context from Fastify View, which is documented over here. The route context is talks goes into detail about everything that's available in it and what you can do with it, and also the order of execution of the hooks that you can export from route modules. But essentially, if you're converting from Astro to View using Festify View, this is the pattern. You have the head section of your page defined with the get meta export. You have get data for data fetching, and that's akin to get server-side props in Next.js. Meaning that it will work in first render in SSR, and it will also work if you're doing client-side navigation. Festify Vite will automatically register an additional endpoint for that. Oh, it started pouring here. I hope it doesn't affect my audio. Okay, so let me show you. Let me use. I know you said you had another 20 minutes, so I'm going to use your remaining 7 minutes to show you this.
Thank you,
Uh,
Jonas.
um, so I just want to show you how everything, all of this works. So if you go to packages and Festify View and index.js, you see here that for create route, this is what I'm doing. I receive the route that's parsed from the pages folder, and then I register a route to render the component. But if it contains a get data, I also register an additional endpoint so I can have access to that. And then I extend the context with all the data that I need. And in the pre-handler of the route, I also execute get data, get meta, and on enter, and all those other hooks that Fastify View has defined. So they will execute server side during first render, and they will also work client side during client side navigation. So yeah, I think that's. I hope that I was able to capture the gist of it. So I'm just going to open up a few minutes for any questions anybody might have.
I think I don't have much time left. Okay, I have. Here we go. I don't have. I think you don't have much time left. I just wanted to thank everybody for the fantastic year, and thank Jonas for coming up on these impromptu, last-minute streams on Fastify Vite. The project, by the way, made a phenomenal growth. Okay, I'm pretty excited. To be honest, it's we need close those
Do a follow up. Yeah.
few those follow up quirks, okay, and try to get that WebSocket bit going, and then we can have a full integration with Platformatic even. This is
Yeah,
on
I
me
would love that.
mostly. It's pretty interesting, to be honest, to see how this is has evolved. It was super clunky to some extent a few years back, and now it's becoming really smooth. I don't know why this is not being picking up a lot. It's you should probably do
It seems like it's finally happening. Yeah. I see people
a build a blog
reaching
in
out.
20 minutes type of thing. Okay, so
Hmm. Yeah.
it's going to be pretty interesting to see if you can get um, to get something going pretty nicely. To be honest, it's
Yep. Yeah, that's my focus now. Examples. I just have been incredibly busy with switching jobs and onboarding and amassing a new massive code base that I'm still learning. But I should squeezing time to do at least an example a week moving forward. So we should do those streams more often.
yeah, yes, absolutely. So just want to leave you with some tiny bit of things. Okay. Um, I don't have time to show you, but we did it a little bit a few times in the past. So there is a tiny module that I wrote. It's called Fastify HTML. It's if you are in the HTMX banana madness, you can try it out. Okay, it's blazing fast as they call it. Okay, it's really fast if you need to render HTML. So it's
Oh, you know what? I think we need something similar. I see here skip on header x request.
yeah.
I think we need to implement some sort of skip on header as well for the WebSocket to start working.
Yeah,
I'll send you the link.
yeah.
I'll
Send
send
me
you the link.
open the issue and send me the link. Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you, folks, for watching. I really need to go and feed my daughter. As you probably know, this is the time that I go feed my daughter. So, thank you very much for watching, folks. And I don't think we will see each other again before the next year. So, thanks, Jonas, for joining. And happy holidays. And see you next year. I will be back with a nice streaming schedule. I promise more online content next year, and less traveling has been killing me. The traveling this year, so I'm probably reducing that a little bit. And check out my YouTube channel; it has a few nice things. This video will be on YouTube as soon as I can edit it. So this is a question mark when we can, but this is a different topic, and that's cool. Perfect, folks. Bye, bye, bye,
Thanks everyone.
bye, bye, bye.